Greetings YouTube, Captain Machine here, back for another video, and as you can tell we've got a bit of a different backdrop because over the last week or so, also corresponding with my increasing video output, I've also been doing some tidying up and rearranging so I can now get to my bookcase. So this is going to be my new backdrop for my videos. I hope you enjoy it. I am kind of stealing an idea off the Gentleman Gamer, thank you sir, in terms of what to use for my backdrop, because ultimately a fraction of my room is not as entertaining as this. I'm not saying this is fantastically entertaining, it's just a case of, for those people out there that want to try and figure out what my collection comprises of, this is a fantastic opportunity if you have a crack at it. I am going to do a video in the near future about my collection now I can get access to it. And just to give you a very brief update of what's going to happen in the future with regards to the channel. As you can tell, my video output has increased. I've got a rotation going on now which makes it much easier and quicker for me to actually make videos. So there's more to enjoy in the near future. As for my Slay Industry stuff, I am going to finish off the last two reviews of that series. I know it's not got the most views compared to everything else out there I've done, but I want to get it completed so I can have a playlist up and running, and anyone that wants to get into that game in the future can approach that and get a full breakdown of every single product that's on there. And that's basically the goal of that. Once I've got that done, I'm going to get back to my regular forte, which is basically anything I can get my hands on, although I'm going to take a very stark interest in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, because for the last 2 years I've gotten increasingly more and more in love with that setting, and games like Dawn of War 2 and Space Marine coming out have only cemented that, as opposed to making it fluctuate in any way whatsoever. People have said after my rant about White Dwarf that I'm falling out of Games Workshop. That's half true. The fantasy side of it, I'm not that enamoured with anymore. It's not doing for me what I want fantasy to do anymore, but the 40k stuff is definitely doing what I want my sci-fi to do. So there's plenty there to play with. Today we're going to be talking about Black Crusade. Now, Black Crusade is the fourth of the Warhammer 40,000 RPGs provided by Fantasy Flight Games, and it was a bit of a surprise when it got first announced, because we honestly thought that the three we got were going to be the only three we got. So obviously you've got Dark Heresy, Rogue Trader and Deathwatch, and this is quite an interesting take. It's almost like a Black Dog-esque move by the company, because although you could argue there are no bad guys in the 40k universe, just shades of grey, if you want to talk your shades of grey, the Chaos one is the darkest of them all, and as such, it is the closest you'll get to playing a bad guy campaign. However, if you're like me and you've been reading a lot into the fiction lately, there are plenty of reasons why this will work, because ultimately we've had plenty of really good fiction books come out with Chaos Space Marines as the protagonists. You've got Ernst Densky-Bauger, I think I'm probably butchering this name, has done some great stuff with the Night Lords. Graham McNeil does some fantastic work with the Iron Lords. Henry Zal's just finished a book called Blood Gorgons, which I've just finished reading, and that's really good. Chaos Tainted Space Marine chapter of his own making. There's a Soul Drinker trilogy, I can't remember who wrote that. I'm sure somebody in the comments might correct me below. And then of course you've got the multi-million-dollar turning over machine, which is the Horus Heresy, because it's now a New York Times bestseller. And in all cases you get believable characters who have their own motivations, their own drives and their own goals, and as such, even though that their tactics might not be what you would expect of a title character, they are believable, and there is some the writer's gone some great lengths to make it so you believe these characters are not two-dimensional cutouts. Obviously Black Library stuff is very pulpy at the very start of it, but they've done put a lot of effort into making sure that these are not two-dimensional characters. There is some depth to them, and that is very entertaining to read. But getting back to the game in hand, this is the first game out of the set that gives you the choice of what race to play. You can either be a human or a Chaos Tainted Space Marine, and as you can tell from the front cover, the Chaos Space Marines are kind of the poster child of this game. I mean, there is a a human psyker there in the background, right there in the background. But ultimately, it's kind of the poster boy of the game is the Chaos Space Marines, because after all, if you play the tabletop game, that's what you encounter. There are very few people out there that have, say, Chaos Tainted Guard, for example. With this, you get to pick from 8 career paths. Now, the 8 career paths themselves don't sound too bad because you've got 8 career paths in the starting set for Dark Heresy. However, you are limited into a choice of 4. And I'm probably going to butcher these names, so I do apologise. For the humans, you've got the Apostate, which is basically your sneaky character. You also your quite influential and charismatic character. You've got your, I think it's Ravager. That's probably not right. Which is your warrior. You've got your Heretic, which is obviously your techie. It's basically a member of the Dark Mechanicum, and then you've got your Psyker. Enough said. And for the Chaos Space Marines, you've got the Forsaken, who are basically individualists. They have either been abandoned or have abandoned their previous warband or chapter or anything like that. So if you want to play, say for example, a Chaos Tainted Space Wolf, for example, go down the Forsaken road, and I'm sure you can work it all out from there. You got the Chosen, who are basically your elite of the Chaos Space Marines, and then you've got the Champion, who is basically your stereotypical leader bad guy. And then of course you've got your Sorcerer. So from either one of the two sides you've got one Psyker to play with. So if you play a non-Psyker, and I know a lot of people do prefer to play non-Psykers, you've got 3 careers to pick from. That's nowhere near as restrictive as it sounds, because if you play Dark Heresy, it sounds incredibly restrictive, because in Dark Heresy you've got, say for example, you've got your Guardsman, and your Guardsman has certain talents and certain increases and certain skills that he gets access to, and that makes him more like a Guardsman. Compared to, say, shall we say, the Scum, which guys get a completely different set of talents, completely different set of skills, and different skill advancements. So once you take in a character of, say, 1st to 10th rank, a Guardsman will look completely different to a Scum, and that's intentional. In this, the careers are nowhere near that restrictive. Basically, in this, all the careers is a starting set of skills, a starting set of talents, possibly some war gear, and a special rule which no other career gets. For example, the Chosen from the Chaos Space Marine has the ability to re-roll their critical damage because they're that good at fighting. So that's kind of what you'd expect, and you can get 2 people playing the exact same career and the characters will come out differently because of the next step. As you would expect from once you've taken your basic skills and your basic talents, you get experience points to spend. Now humans get 1,000 experience points as a base character, whereas Space Marines only get 500. So it does give a balancing factor right there for the humans versus Chaos Space Marines. And also, if you look at the human careers, they have a lot more skills, a lot more talents given to them compared to, say, the Space Marines. And from there you can pick anything you want. I'm not kidding when I say that. All of the skills, all of the stat increases, and all of the talents, they are, by the way, separated into 3 tiers, and you've got tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and they're priced differently. But all of those are exactly the same price regardless of what proficiency you want to be going for. So if you want to make someone that's really into using the heavy weapons, off you go. If you're making someone that's close combat, off you go. If you want to make someone that's subtle and sneaky and got lots of like stealthy skills, off you go. You can do all of those and they're all exactly the same price. Now here's where it gets interesting. A lot of the talents, a lot of the skills and a lot of the stat increases are attributed to various of the Chaos Gods, and at the start of the character creation you assume to be unaligned. So say for example you get a stat up in strength, that's a Khorne attribute. Toughness is a Nurgle attribute. Fellowship is a Slaanesh attribute. Willpower is a Tzeentch attribute. So if those go up at any point, you get a tick against that god. Same goes for certain skills, same goes for certain talents. Once you've got a certain number of skills or talents ticked off as that particular god, then once you hit your first tier of corruption, then you become a follower of that god. You've aligned yourself to that god, and as such, anything else you want to buy for that god in the future becomes a lot cheaper. However, things that go from the opposing gods are become much more expensive, and the unopposed gods are about the same price anyway. So you've got a definite risk reward, because if you wanted to go in a particular route, it's very easy to do so because you can just tunnel down, get to where you want to be, get yourself aligned to that god, and things become a lot cheaper, a lot quicker to deal with. However, things that you may want to pick up in the future, say for example your Khorne Berserker wants to have more willpower to make him, I don't know, more resistant to psychic attacks, or make him more brave, then he's going to have to take points in willpower, which is a Zeech attribute, which is going to be more expensive for him. Anyway, that might explain why Khorne Berserkers aren't as known for their willpower, and not known for their, shall we say, restraint. But there you go. And so there's a very much risk-reward system for that, and if you keep going down the path of aligning yourself to one particular god, eventually you get a mark, which gives you more talents and more abilities above and beyond what you normally would get, and in my opinion, that is, the marks themselves have really nice rules to them, and they're really worth aiming for. If you, for example, you want to be that Plague Marine, you want to be that Khorne Berserker, you want to be that Zeechian Sorcerer, you want to be that Noise Marine, you know, if you want to go down that route, there is a very much a reward at the end of the tunnel for you doing that. Basically, corruption in this game is nothing like it is in the previous games. Corruption is kind of a punishment in the other games for doing evil things, or doing questionable things, or being in the presence of large amounts of chaos power. In this, it's naturally assumed that you've already acquired the maximum of 100 corruption and made yourself an NPC, because that's what would normally happen. If you got to that level of corruption, regardless of whether or not you got mutated from it, you would get your character taken off you and it would become an NPC. However, in this, it's assumed that everyone has hit 100 corruption already, and it's stricken off the 0. And corruption, although it hasn't got a different name, which is a little bit confusing, is a different thing. This is basically your seeking your gods or seeking the notice of the Chaos Gods themselves, and depending on whether you're human or a Chaos Space Marine, the trigger points are different. Once you hit a certain trigger point, if you've aligned yourself to a god, you become aligned. If you've gone well deep into that alignment, when you hit your next trigger point, you can get that mark. And the idea is that you are supposed to, the goal of the game is to acquire a warband, is to achieve a goal, or launch a Black Crusade, or become some powerful individual before you hit 100 corruption. Because if you hit 100 corruption and you haven't achieved your goals, then the Chaos Gods will not smile down upon you, and you'll be stricken down and turned into a Chaos Spawn, which basically means you've failed. And if you succeed, you can become either a Chaos Warlord, or General, or even, if you're lucky, a Demon Prince. That's also something to aim for as well. So you've got a goal built into the game for that. So, much like the other 40k games that have come out in the past, you have your own setting. So in this you've got the Vortex, which is like a mini Eye of Terror. It's an overlap between the warp space and the material plane. So you've got the demon infused and the slightly over the top high fantasy or dark fantasy elements built in there. But as with all the others, they are next to each other. So this is right next to the Kronos Expanse, it's right next to the Calixtic Sector, and by virtue of the Warp Gate, it's also right next to the Jericho Reach. So you can, if you're happy or you're comfortable or you like those settings a lot, you can play this game within those settings, and it gives you plenty of options and plenty of rules to do that. But within the Vortex itself, and you can take it or leave it, in my honest opinion, because of the nature of the game. You are supposed to be launching assaults into Imperium territory. Smiting down or destroying things of the Imperium gets you big corruption rewards, so you can get noticed by your gods for doing it. So you can take it or leave it. And as far as the Vortex is concerned, it scratches that itch I've got for a cross between dark fantasy, which is what it is, and obviously the dark sci-fi that is Warhammer 40,000. So you've got a lot to play with there. So magic in this area is real. It's not something that is a misunderstood form of psychers or anything like that. It's literally real. So strange, unusual things can happen, and it's expected. It's not unusual that strange, unusual things will happen. So you've got that that to look forward to if you're running or playing within that game. Overall, I think this is a really, really, really good game. I give this a solid 4 out of 5. The reason why I don't give it a 5 out of 5, and you can tell that I'm quite a big fan of it by the way I'm gushing all over this, is there are a couple of things which in my opinion drag it back from being perfect. First of all, although some efforts are made to balance the humans and the Space Marines, it doesn't really give that much information how the two should interact with each other, because Space Marines are fundamentally much more powerful. I mean, for example, the Horde rules, which are within Deathwatch, are also included within here as well, so the assumption is if you're playing Chaos Space Marines, you can use the Horde rules, off you go. But if you're playing as humans, or you have humans in your parties, humans can't survive Horde attacks. It's just too much, too fast, too quickly that they can't deal with. And secondly, even with the difference between like the 1,000 experience points starting that humans get compared to the 500 Space Marines get, even Fantasy Fighter themselves have said that the equivalent experience cost for the Space Marines after creation is complete is higher than that of a human. So it's a little bit hard to go by of how they were balanced. I haven't play tested it yet myself, so I don't know how that would interact. I honestly believe that what's going to happen is a lot of people are just going to want to play the poster child of the game, which is the Chaos Space Marines. But once you've got your head around that little problem, the only other thing that comes up is the fact is that the rules have subtly been changed. Now there is an 8-page section of the game which explains this for you. So if you wanted to cross over to say Dark Heresy or Rogue Trader, for example, you can easily do that. But there are some subtle differences to the rules you need to be made aware of. The most fundamental being that certain skills that never existed before now do exist, like parry. Parry is now a skill, not a talent. Which I think is a bit weird. I'm not sure about that myself, personally. I just think that's another skill that got put in because Khorne needed more skills. So I'm not sure if I'm going to household that one or not. I'll play it first, test it and see what happens, and then base my decision on that once I get that far. But up until this point, parry's always been something that you've just been able to do if you can fight. Also, certain talents have been renamed, which is not a big deal. Unless you're really deep into this game and you're looking for that one particular talent you really look for, not only to realise that it's still there, it's just got a different name. And certain skills have been amalgamated into others. There's not many examples of it. It's not as radical as, say, the changeover from 3.5 to 4th edition for D&D, but there is a subtle change there, and the game does make you aware of it if you are going to be cross-combining this information with the other games, because you do need to be aware of it. If you're playing this game by itself as a standalone product, it's nothing you need to worry about. But I know a lot of people are going to buy this not because they want to play Chaos Space Marines, although I can't see why not, but they want it for a catalogue of things that they can give to their bad guys for their party members to encounter. I suppose the other minor nagging point is the fact is that, once again, it's a hardbound book. How many pages? 400-page hardbound book, and a good chunk of that is the rules. So if you're like me, you have this book, and you also have the other 4 books. That can be quite a big investment for effectively what you've got there is the same rules printed over and over and over again. I can see why they've done it, because they've avoided going down the White Wolf system, because White Wolf acknowledge the fact is that with their games, Vampire the Masquerade, World of the Apocalypse, Hunter the Vigil, is it Hunter the Vigil? Or the various different games they produced had basically the exact same rules reprinted book upon book upon book. So when they got around to their update, they produced a standard book, and then from the standard book, which told you how to play humans, you could then buy splat books for the various monsters if you want to play as the various monsters. Now, I can't think of a good way of doing that in 140k universe because there is no standard setting for it. Everything is very much personalised, and it might be a bit of a stretch if you wanted to just play Black Crusade to then say, right, to play Black Crusade you have to buy Black Crusade and then you have to buy Dark Heresy, or you have to buy the Warhammer 40k RPG rulebook. and that can be a bit of a stab for people. This is a self-contained game right here in this book. Now, if you're like me and you're an avid collector, you are rebuying the same rules, but bear in mind that I am not the norm, I am the exception. Most people find one thing they're happy with and stick with it, and there's no harm with that whatsoever. And if you are a collector, you have to be prepared for this sort of thing every now and then. So all in all, it'd be a solid 4 out of 5, and I fully do support this game, and I'm looking forward to playing this with my group. Thank you for your time, guys. Bye bye.